So I have two teenagers, a 16-year-old boy and a now 13-year-old girl. And let me tell you, I feel for them. They're both so empathetic and kind and thoughtful and sensitive. Don't get me wrong, they have their moments when they're maddening, impossible, seemingly thoughtless, but I can already see the adults they'll become and are becoming. I don't mean like their career tracks or who they'll marry or if they'll marry or whatever. I just mean that beyond all the angst and the moodiness, I think I can see the fully realized people they will be. But man, it's going to be a journey, and I worry like hell for them. So today I'm excited to talk to Matt Richtel, who has a ton of insight into the journey of adolescence. Matt is a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter for the New York Times and the author of How We Grow Up, which is a narrative/science exploration of adolescence that blends cutting-edge neuroscience, history, and intimate reportage to explain what's happening inside today's teens and why this generation is struggling in unprecedented ways. As I said, I'm in the thick of it with two teens. I don't think I've ever needed fresh face in hell as badly as I do today, so please welcome Matt Richtel to the show. Matt, thank you for being our fresh face in hell.
Thank you for letting me be your fresh face in hell.
See, you're smiling now. This feels good to be.
Is that the proper, what is the proper greeting for a fresh face in hell?
I don't know, man. I think you did just fine. A smile does it for me. So, first, let's define adolescence, which is kind of a, moving goalpost over the generations. I mean, how do we delineate it at the current moment? Where does adolescence begin, and how far past the teenage years does it now extend?
Yeah. I'm going to take a shot at offering a definition that is roughly entirely new. So if you decide I'm now a stale face in hell, you just hit delete and we can move on. But this is the definition that I've settled on after a couple of years of looking at the science. Adolescence is a period of life with a very, very defined purpose. And that is the integration of the known and the unknown in order to facilitate survival. The known is what your parents tell you, or your teachers tell you, or what all those people told you before puberty. And the unknown is what actually works in a changing world. And if you are an adolescent, you have come of age in a period of accepted conventional wisdom that may no longer be applicable. And in order to determine what works, you have to put it to the test. Adolescence, in short, is a period of profound information processing.
I like it. That's very succinct, and it's also very, I can already see how timely the subject's going to be when we talk about changing times. I mean, it seems like for many generations, you go back to the 19th century and your dad was a cobbler, you were a cobbler, there's no internet, there's like defined rules, you probably live in a smaller community, all communication is face-to-face. Things were so much easier to define. One thing that's sort of universal, it seems, about adolescence through the ages is that pushback and boundary testing are two of the hallmarks, right? I mean, the reality is they begin biologically much earlier, even in the womb, as you point out in the book. Could you delve into this for me a little bit?
Yeah. Let's just say for a second, you accept my construct. If you do, it changes how we think about the centuries-old idea that adolescents were intended to conflict with their parents, that this is a period of inherent angst and clashing. My take on it, and I'll get to the biology in 1 second, is that if you must test what your parents have told you, and I'll give you some specific examples. Here's one. Reading. Here's a very simple example. We have told our kids that reading is invaluable. Reading books. Why have we told them this? because from our experience, it was invaluable. It was social currency. It's how we got information. It's how we processed information. So now you're a kid coming of age right now, and your parents have lectured you like nobody's business that they have to read a book. But they have begun to see a world where there are fresh faces in hell on podcasts, and there's streaming TV, and there's entire new ways to get information. So when they come back home to their parents and say there's something else out there, what we might define as rebellion is actually a very clear example of an effort to reconcile what was known, accepted truth and what is shifting. Am I here to tell you don't tell your kids to read? No. Am I here to tell you that they only have to listen to podcasts? No, it's not the point. The point is that creates a sense of conflict in two respects. Inside the kid's parents who love them, who have fed them, who have swaddled them, swear to them, this is the unconditional truth. So the kid's already feeling conflicted because they're seeing something else outside in the world. And at the same time, this creates conflict between parents and kids who the parents are like, you dumbass, you will wind up destitute if you don't read. I mean,
I try to avoid that one, but
you know what I mean? Like,
oh
you know
yeah,
the
no,
temptation-
I'm not going to say I haven't said it at some point in a moment of passion.
So let me ask you, John, to just give an example.
Sure.
What are some unconditional truths that we held to that may face challenge from young people experiencing a different world?
You're going to get married. You're going to own a home. I mean, I'm just thinking a lot of stuff we took for granted. I mean, personally, as a parent, like I look at this as all being about independence. To me, this is the crux of adolescence, like this forging of independence, which is consistent with what you're saying, trying to delineate between the known and the unknown. And to me, independence is wrapped up into that. And as a parent, it's so palpable, and it's as frustrating as it is. I'm compelled to let it happen. Like it has to happen. So I'm not like, I'm trying not to push absolutes on my kids. I've learned that if you want to impart any wisdom or guidance to, like, say, my 16-year-old, I've got to do it in a way that allows him, if I really think it's important, to think he did it in his own way, kind of you know what I mean? Like arrive there by himself.
John,
And
let
if he,
me seize on that. They're great examples you said, because they're things we have understand to be, in effect, ironclad truths for many centuries. But first, let me stay with independence. What is independence? It is central to this conversation. Independence is the ability to care for yourself, or, should you desire, in the future, your offspring. And the purpose of adolescence, the reason we reconcile what's known and unknown, is in order to survive independently. For the first part of our lives, we are effectively hearing and relying on only one set of information. It's what happens in our home. And why not? Those are the people that feed and care and love for us. But pretty soon that's going to end. Here's a great study out of Stanford. These neuroscientists take some young people, both before and after puberty. I'll explain why that's important in a bit. And they have them listen to adults say a nonsense word. The nonsense word is puideschwalt. It doesn't matter what it means because it has no meaning. Some of the adults speaking the word are their parents, and some of the adults speaking the word are strangers. As kids go, and then I've neglected to mention this, while the kids are hearing this, their brains are being imaged. So we're looking at the brains of young people on both sides of puberty, listening to the voices of their mother and strangers say a nonsense word. You with me? Did I get that out okay?
Yeah. No, I wanted to go there about, I mean, we're talking about an actual brain reorganization that happens during the teen years.
Bingo. And you can probably already guess the punchline, but before adolescence or puberty, you can see from the way the circuitry in the brain works that the adolescent is focused on the mom's voice saying a nonsense word. But afterwards, it's very plain that the adolescent is now listening to the stranger's voice. Importantly, this is why they choose a nonsense word. It's irrelevant what the person's saying. The outside voice has become more important. What's your guess as to why that is?
Well, again, it ties back into independence. It's what you said, trying to delineate the known from the unknown. They already know what this is. I've observed what you're talking about. And I think it's consistent with what I was saying about letting my son kind of come to, I tried to teach him and impart my wisdom or my guidance to him. And sometimes there's like a 6 or 7 month lag. And I think that's the time he's going out and hearing it from strangers and kind of comparing it to like what he hears from me. And much of the time, thankfully, I feel like he's coming back to me and arriving at the same conclusion, but not before he's gone out and tested that with the strangers.
And I think we should be clear that it's not like all of our wisdom is wrong. Much of it is very correct and time tested, and we tested it too.
Right,
So
but it's untested for them.
let's say 90% of it they come back to, but some of it they won't. Just a bit more biology to get at this Puitish thing. When puberty hits, it sets off a cascade of hormones that essentially compel the adolescent to be listening to that external information. So it's not like they even have a choice in this matter. Biology is saying to them, if you don't pay attention to what's happening outside your home, you will die there. I mean, I'm being a little bit blunt, John, but it helps it helps explain that this is not a messed up young person. This is a pre-programmed young person who is designed to go out and explore. And that exploration is threatening to the people at home in two respects. One, it feels insulting. You're not listening to me, and I earned this knowledge. And two, it feels threatening because what if we're wrong?
Yeah. See, I feel like a lot of parenting, and I'm kind of pariah among the other parents in my community. I go to the school board meetings. We've gone to co-op schools and things like that. And some of the things I say, I'm like, can we take it easy on the math or something? And everyone's just like stink eye, like, no, they can't compete in the global economy this way. And I'm just like, so I'm glad that you brought up the exploration process, because like for me, what that meant was I was in a punk band by the time I was 14 years old. I was touring the West Coast with guys 7, 8, 10 years older than me, and my mom had no idea where I was. That was my exploration. And she had already lost a daughter on a road trip on her 16th birthday. Of course, the adolescent mind is kind of focused on itself. That's something you'll probably debunk later too. But now I'm proud when my son just goes to Seattle and explores and does these outer things. And I know this is generational, but like every parent, and I'm one of them now, worries that their kids are getting too much screen time and doing too much of this exploration out amongst these strangers it's like a whole nother level of stranger. It's not a face-to-face stranger. It could be a bot. It could be you know what I mean? It could be a non-human entity. We attribute their moodiness to it, their lack of initiative, their lack of activity, their lack of fresh air. But like, what does the science really tell us about screen time?
Yeah, so glad you asked. This is the easy default answer, and it is essentially wrong. And
I'm set up to, I'm going to learn where I'm wrong a lot today. I've already
no,
feeling that.
I don't
That's
mean
good.
you're wrong. I
But
mean
I
that
am.
there is an ethos right now and a conventional wisdom that says online activity is murdering our kids. And it is responsible for increases in anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and so forth. I need to contextualize this, and then later on, can I express some frustration?
Oh, absolutely.
Or should I express it first?
That's up to you, man.
I'm frustrated because
You
what
be
I'm
you,
about to
man.
tell you is based on some really good science. And it seems like a lot of people are prone to want to believe a much more simplistic answer. And that makes it hard to sell books.
It's
So
hard to sell books anyway.
it's hard to sell books anyway. But
Yeah.
here's what the science says. Some people who use social media, meaning adolescents, are left less happy. Some people are left more happy. The actual act of using social media does not inherently cause mental health distress. What I think we can say a little more definitively before I even broaden this further is that anytime you're looking at a screen or anything many, many hours of the day, it displaces things we know to be healthful.
Yes.
And that is exercise, the value of in-person interaction, the value of taking breaks, the value of allowing your attention span to flourish or your imagination.
Yeah, and the tactile senses as well. You're not smelling as much, you're not touching as much, you're not,
All parts of, and the chief one, I left out the most important one, is sleep. In order to make this transition from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, you've got to have some of these experiences in the real world on a rested brain, capable of taking in and processing the information. But that's a little different, if not manifestly different, than the idea that social media is bad or the phone is bad. What I'm a proponent of is the displacement theory, that too much of this displaces things we know to be healthful. So I would urge parents to think of it this way. Before I demonize the phone and social media, what can I do to ironclad create an environment where my kids get the things I know to be most important first? And then start to ask myself, is this a real world I really understand and I'm going to police? Because it may be the future. In fact,
yes,
likely is.
yes,
In the same way
yes.
that the punk band or whatever, in the same way that the Beatles and the Clash and the Rolling Stones were the future and Elvis Presley was the future and parents thought he was the devil. And I actually write about it in the book. That we're not capable of discerning, because of our own defensiveness and lack of wisdom, what exactly is the future. And rather than demonize something that we don't fully understand, I would encourage us to protect the things we really do understand. One last word about why this is a source of frustration for me. There's a whole line of thinking out here that seems to suggest if we just take away the phone, everything's going to be fine. And that is flatly false. It just doesn't make sense, because it's the real origin of the challenges faced by young people has to do with the lack of coping skills we have in a very, very fast changing, very complex and chaotic environment. And the reason this book is called How We Grow Up is because adolescents and adults alike are going to have to figure out how to navigate the world we're in a healthy way, and taking the phone away is not going to solve the problems.
Thank you. My kids have friends whose parents take their phones away, or they limit their screen time, or they don't let them get a phone till they're a junior in high school or something. And my thought is, like, you're just robbing them of social currency. You're robbing them of the social context they'll need. You're robbing them of an understanding of the own culture they're going to be forced to come of age in. They're going to be behind the arc. I mean, like it or hate it, it's here. And this is how they engage. This is how much of their social activity happens. This is where they get their news. This is where they learn to sort information from disinformation, and they're way better at it than us. I mean, my son is so much more conversant in it, just as he is in technology. My 8-year-old does my tech support. I mean, I think it comes back down to the old age-old kids today. You know what I mean? We gotta culture accelerates. And so I'm going to ask you later, we're going to look for kind of an analog of another generation that maybe kind of comes sort of closest to kind of this present moment where we're at. But like, I thank you for saying that, because I feel like, as much as I don't like it, because I don't want to be online all the time, it's probably necessary for them to navigate these things.
Look, these things are not, they're not binary. You're not saying go on the phone all the time. This is why I tend to think of it as the displacement method. What are the things we're displacing that we know to be vital, like sleep and exercise, in-person interaction, attention? Those can be, the time can be made for those things. So the much bigger issue, even setting aside your really important point that this is their economic future, that environment is
Yeah, and
their
I didn't even mean
economic future.
economic. I meant social and emotional health. I'm not really worried about the economics, but like just
John, when I
engagement.
say economics, that is my placeholder for survival. I don't mean like having a job. I mean, the way you survive is by having enough resources.
Right. Yeah, I
And to
did use
me,
the term currency. Yeah, I
that
used
is
the term currency.
that is social currency. That is economics. So I think we're just using slightly different words. But setting aside your fine point that this is their future, I think we're actually doing a really big disservice by not acknowledging what's actually happening in society right now. And I see it as a profound opportunity if we can. And the thing that strikes me as happening is that we are coming to terms with how chaotic and fast moving and unpredictable our environment is. And to contextualize this, and we are really struggling to feel comfortable and happy in that environment. To contextualize this, I want to take you back to, how old are you?
57.
57. Okay, we're
I
right
know. I
about.
look so young, right? Is that
I
what you're
mean,
thinking? You're like, I had to be 42.
I can do all the jokes, whichever direction you want.
Just say I look young. That'll be.
I mean, you guys should see this. It's radical. I thought he was
Unfortunately, many of them are. So
look, we came of age in the same time, 80s, early 90s. Binge drinking was at its historic worst. Drunk driving, injury, and death was at its historic worst. We had smoking cigarettes was at its historic worst, largely. Maybe a little bit down from that. Drug use is down. Binge drinking is down. Drunk driving, injury is down, all among adolescents. Why am I mentioning this? Because
sex is down too.
What's that? So
Sex is
early
down too.
experimentation with sex
Yeah.
is down. All these things we demonized. If I had to guess what we were doing back then, John, I'd guess we were also beginning to cope with a pretty complex environment using the tools we had around us.
Threat of nuclear war, first generation to like start to see no jobs waiting for us as it had for our forefathers and so forth. And
or the media telling us that. I mean, it's hard to know. We had a booming economy thereafter. So it's very hard to discern objective good and bad from what the narrative of the time is. Now we've sort of stripped away those coping mechanisms as young people. And we're left with a world where the economy is shifting. Again, when I say economy, I'm talking about how the world works. It's shifting very, very, very quickly. And I want to give adults a sense of what it feels like to be an adolescent that you may get in a changing world. All right, John, so you have an argument with your wife one night, and then your podcast numbers have gone down and you get a pretty sleepless night. You're a little bit worried. You pull up to a stoplight the next day in the car, and you look to the left, and some guy looks over, and you intuit his look to mean, let's fight. I mean, he may mean nothing, but your brain is looking for a place for all that frustration and angst and uncertainty. And you flip him the bird and rage ensues. If you're a young person who's dealing with a lot of shifting things, not just uncertainty in relationships, uncertainty at work, a changing school environment, your parents telling you stuff, you get a bad night's sleep, and you wonder what it's like and why these big emotions implode or explode, it's identical to a kind of road rage. It's not really about the people on the road. It's about the confluence of things going on in your brain. I'm going to connect that back to the binge drinking, et cetera. But does that make sense?
Well, yes, yes. And I tell myself all the time not to, I'm an empath, so I take everything personally, the whole world. So every time I wake up any one of my three kids and they say, I hate you, and they're just like assholes, I remind myself just what you're saying. This isn't necessarily personal. This is just psychic, emotional, lack of sleep. This is all, yes,
Income
this resonates.
stimulation, changing world. We got a shot right here, John, to help our kids learn to deal with that stuff in a way that's much healthier than binge drinking, and healthier too than escaping into social media all the time. And it's a kind of a gift we've been given at this period in history where our anxiety is being unmasked a little bit. So one thing that you already hit on for parents directly, doesn't seem useful to take this stuff personally. Entirely not meant personally. Here's a brain trying to reconcile what's new and what's not new with a lot of changing stuff, sometimes some sleeplessness. It's that road rage brain that has nothing to do with mom and dad. That doesn't mean they get to yell at you. You can say, hey, not cool to talk to me that way. But they're not saying, John, I hate you, you're a crappy dad. And even if they were, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and something I learned early on from our co-op teacher Ellen, our co-op. All our kids went to this lovely co-op preschool. She was always reminding us that about the brain, about that part of the brain that's reactive, and how these are not your teachable moments anyway. So, like if somebody's mad or you're having a fight, or if your kid did something that was just way out of line, that's not even the time to talk about. Just absorb, let it pass, and then find a moment when everybody's calmer later, maybe to just bring it up in a completely different context.
Where did you come across that information?
Teacher Ellen, our beloved preschool teacher. Our kids all went there for 3 years before they started school, and school has been all downhill since.
Well,
Like,
sounds brilliant to me based on the science that I've learned. To start to get at what I mean by coping mechanisms, Ellen's launched us. That when you look at the science around this issue, you discover that when an adolescent is in the middle of one of these explosive moments, I would liken it to when your computer goes blue screen. It's frozen. And you try to hit the enter key to get more information into it, and it's not doing anything. You got to let it reboot. And in that moment, that brain is overcome by all this information. The last thing we need to do is introduce more information into it. It's effectively frozen. And if we wait a little bit, whether through saying, I get how you're feeling, or go have a cry, I'm not going to take it personally, or scream and yell, it's got nothing to do with me, the information overload will pass and the opportunity will present itself.
yes, yes, and I think, honestly, as a parent now, all these years later, I still think of that weekly, if not daily. Um, Early on in the book, you do something that was really interesting. You create these really compelling character studies, sort of, for lack of a better, adolescent archetypes. And then later in the book, you revisit them in order to kind of show their evolution through the process of adolescence. Can we walk through those characters one at a time? Yeah. So Darren, the dutiful rebel.
Yeah. So Darren grows up in the South. He's in a pretty affluent environment. Um, he is the child of immigrants, and he's black. He has dark skin, and he starts to face some things at school that are less likely, I guess, to happen now, but were really jarring. For instance, when he graduates from high school, he is given by his bandmates, I believe they give him a watermelon to say, every senior gets a present. His is a watermelon, as if to say, yes, you're a band member, but you're also our black band member. And along the way, his parents are telling him that you are dutiful. We don't complain about things. We get things done. You're first generation. And he is trying to reconcile this world that is pretty hard for him with what his parents are telling him about how to behave. And they also have very, very strict ideas about what he should do with his life. And he starts to take in the information in the world around him and gravitate toward being interested in becoming a doctor. And his mom, interestingly enough, thinks this is a terrible idea. And his story is about how someone who had some difficult circumstances that a lot of young people faced began to reconcile what his parents wanted for him or idealized and what he was experiencing and how he made sense of it. And he becomes a really neat character in the end who has really quite a tremendous success story and does in some ways reconcile with his parents and in some ways teaches us the desperate need to sail away from your parents if you're going to make it in the world.
And that comes to him by way of self-acceptance.
That comes in by way of self-acceptance and hard work and years of time. But he winds up, John, through this, a major contributor to our society as well. So it's hard to overgeneralize from any story, but I think his story helps us understand the sense of conflict that comes when your parents give you a set of lessons and those are not entirely relevant. And in the end, as he accepted his place in the world and who he was, he became a major success story.
Wow. So then the next one was Luke and Henry. This was one household, two adolescents.
Yeah. Luke and Henry, I think probably the most evocative, hardest story to think about. Family I've come to cherish in the North Carolina, 3 boys, relatively conservative, religious, and Luke is a boy who helps us understand that some kids don't rebel all that much. They actually stick a little closer to home, and to explain why that might be, there's a spectrum of us, John, in the world who are more or less attuned to those outside forces. It's just like any biological phenomenon. There's a spectrum. So John went and joined a punk band at 14, but his neighbor may have not felt quite as attuned to the outside forces as that. And we need all of that to survive. Henry, unfortunately, took a very different path. It's a heartbreaking story in which during COVID, as he tried to make sense of the world, he found a very perverse coping mechanism in an eating disorder. And I don't want to tell you exactly how that story ends, other than to say it's quite a shattering, painful story and a really interesting experience to see Luke and Henry in contrast so that the reader understands, and I had to understand as a writer, that this is not a uniform experience. There are Lukes and there are Henrys, and there are lots in between. And the
This
science,
resonates.
yeah, and the science supports all of that, all of their existence, if you will.
So the Luke and Henry story just resonates with me so strongly because we often talk across a bunch of disciplines and psychology and with guests about nature and nurture. And so I've got two teenagers, as I said, and I got a 16-year-old who doesn't give a rat's ass about school. He gets all F's. He's smart as a whip, but like, no, I'm not pushing any kind of, there's no top down mandate. You need to get this kind of grade, that kind of grade. He is just nothing. Then I got a 13-year-old girl, straight A's, stresses herself out studying. You know what I mean? To the point where it's, OCD, like just, and same environment, same schools, same sort of parental philosophy. And yet you have these two different personalities. And I think that that's something parents need to prepare themselves more. I think parents overestimate the influence they have. Of course, keeping your kids safe and sheltered and understood and these things that we have control over are huge. But I think there are certain things, whether they're genetically coded or they're just nature or they're part of the environment outside the household that we can't control, are going to result. Go. You got what I'm saying.
We're in support of diversity in this context. I've written, this is probably my 10th book, fourth of nonfiction, and a theme that continues to come through on the science side is the essential nature of diversity in biology. And the reason for that is that if we don't present the hostile world with some options, if we were all uniform, we could very well be wiped out. Arguably, the crystalline most place to see it is with the immune system. If all our immune systems were the same, then one virus came through, done. So in the case of adolescence, there is a spectrum of people who are more dutiful, more likely to not be attuned to the outside voice, and a spectrum of people who are more prone to explore. And just a word about why we need those people. Remember, I noted that the world is changing, John. It's changing whether we like it or not. And you made the point, well, back in the cobbler days, it changed slowly. And we may not even recognize how quickly the world is going to change 100 years from now. But I think of those people on the part of the spectrum who are less likely to follow the rules as our advanced scouts testing out the stuff that's out there. Adolescents are advanced scouts to a greater or lesser degree, looking at those changes and exploring them, and we kind of need them to do that. So it stands to reason biologically that even in your household where you've raised two kids largely the same, one of the three is programmed to be this adventurous, the second this adventurous, the third less adventurous, because also to the point of less adventurous, the people who keep us anchored in our rule system are valuable too.
Yeah, this works on every level. This works on a genetic level. This works on a social level, a cultural level. Everything you said about just the need for genetic dynamism, you need the same thing in culture. You can't, if we all had the same skill set, we're sunk. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know math, somebody else. I mean, I'm producing a film right now and I realize I have to lean so heavily on these people that have these specific skill sets that are beyond my purview that I could not do it by myself. And so this works, again, nature and nurture just folding into each other constantly. The next case study was Lindsay. Sorry, I don't want to hurry you through this, but I want to get to all these. Lindsay, the rebel outlaw versus, Darren, the dutiful outlaw.
Lindsay, another really, really powerful story of someone who tells us a lot about the need to test an environment for survival when that environment is very contrary to what her parents told her. But in her case, her mother, single mother, West Baltimore. And Lindsay is told, don't ever go outside and sell drugs. But Lindsay's understanding of how to survive in this world as a headstrong, adventurous, and entrepreneurial person leads her to become one of the few young women to have a spot on the block selling drugs in West Baltimore and become, if not a dominant figure there, then a stable figure there, ultimately taken down by the life of crime she's a part of, and has to effectively learn to reconcile the known and the unknown in a terrible prison stint. But it's really interesting to watch her try to make sense of what her mother tells her to do and what she sees as the environment around her, lending social currency, lending survival, getting her new shoes. So another great example, one that you got to read to the end to see how it turns out, but it really helps us. It helped me appreciate another shade of the adolescent experience.
Yeah. I as a parent, I just think like sometimes I think like because this natural inclination to and I before this conversation I would have said rebel, but now I'm just going to say explore. Uh because of this I almost feel like as a parenting philosophy, you could almost be better served by trying to teach your kids the opposite of what you think is good for them. Like, I want to tell my daughters, database player, database player, database player.
I mean,
Just
let's
like
draw, let's
I'll
draw
never.
some clear. I'm glad you brought it up because there's some clear lines we need to, like, don't drink and drive, don't date a bass player. But actually, while we're at this point, it does beg a question, like, what is the level at which we want to intervene? And certainly there's anything that puts their lives at risk, would cause them to harm themselves or harm someone else, such that they don't ever get through the adolescent odyssey. Those are deal breakers to me. So, like, I get that my kids, also in high school, are going to drink some beers and experiment with some things. But it is never, ever, ever okay to be in a car with a driver who's impaired, whether it's them or somebody else. Like, that is, those are things I'm willing to absolutely go to the mat over. And I don't think data bass player falls under that head. I've had some bands and I don't know. What about the drummer, John?
Yeah, well, what's got three legs and an asshole, a drum stool. All right, so this is interesting because you're saying we do need to draw these lines, and now this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble with my laissez-faire parenting. If I just simply say over and over to my kids, don't drink and drive, don't drink and drive, don't drink and drive, how do I know that that's going to stick? Because we've already talked about how they're going to go out and explore what they've learned versus what. So my solution is to that. We have a cabin out in the woods with a detached garage, and when they're on the weekend, my son has a friend, he knows there's beer in the mini fridge. Like, I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying, hey guys, let's drink. But like, I mean, if there's a couple tall boys missing in the morning, I'm not going to overreact to that. My whole philosophy on that is that by not encouraging it, but condoning it to the point where it's in a safe environment, they're going to understand. I mean, it's like a learning example. Of course, I'm going to say don't drink and drive too, but when they can see a working example of why and like how this makes more sense, and like in
Yeah, I
the
mean,
fact that I don't need to go out and drive and get some 21-year-old I don't know to buy me beer outside of the, mini mart or whatever.
You're talking about harm reduction,
Yeah. Okay.
which is, a well-established strategy for dealing with problems. We know, distribution of condoms is harm reduction. Kids are going to have sex. They don't have to have babies or STDs.
Good example. Yeah. Great example.
But I go a little further on the drunk driving one, because when you pick, I think there are ways of putting systems in place that make it less likely that someone's going to test the most dangerous things. And I'll give you an example. Uber is or Lyft are the great inventions around drunk driving.
Absolutely. Except we live in a rural area, so they don't exist. So
okay, we're in a place where they exist. You say to your kid, I will pay for an Uber anytime. Your
Yeah, I'll
kids
put an
come to
Uber
the
account on
cabin.
your phone with my credit card. Yeah.
Yeah, your kids come to the cabin and you take everybody's keys away. What I'm getting at here is the they're going to experiment around a bunch of things. To the extent that we can keep them from experimenting around the most dangerous things, we get them through this period. I think I can imagine parents saying to me, or skeptical parents saying, well, Matt, you have a more, what I consider to be dangerous is, I consider more things to be dangerous than you do. I consider, I'm just making this up, but getting high once to be more dangerous than you do. I consider to be going out late more dangerous than you do. I consider a co-ed party more everybody's got their line to draw. And I can't tell a parent, I can't even begin to suggest to a parent where their line is, but I'm asking them to think about the idea that picking our spots will get us further than uniformly trying to dictate behavior.
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Doesn't always work,
I think
as
it
you
sounds
know.
like it's working very well.
Well, yeah, I mean, depends by which measure. I believe so because I think they're psychic and emotionally healthy, and I think that they go through these stages where it's like get out of my room, shut the door in my face, but then like and as a parent, it just breaks your heart. But then a couple months or a couple of weeks will pass, and then all of a sudden here they are. They're like, "Hey, you want to watch a movie?" There, you know what I mean? Like, and it's on their terms. That's the other thing I've discovered about adolescence. Again, is like let them come back. Don't keep them tethered up and let them do their exploration, but give them that solid base to come back to so that and it's scary. It's a scary proposition, but if you hold that rope, it's like a dog. You know how the dog thinks when you have the dog on the leash and it pulls? The harder you pull the dog back, the more it thinks the more the dog thinks it wants you to pull, right? So you got to like try to slacken that leash and the
Let me
dog will
let
stop
me let
pulling.
me frame that in terms of information processing. When you hold back the leash, you're actually doing something you may not realize, which is that you're adding more information to a brain that's already struggling with information overload. Just to go back to the construct, kid is trying to make sense of what they've heard, what's out there. They got a lot going on in there. Now you hold the rope. Well, here's how that could actually come across to a young person. My parents are really worried about me. It's more information I have to take into my brain at a time I'm already trying to make sense of a lot of information. It doesn't come across as they're not letting me do this, which is its own challenge. It also comes across as they are emotionally invested in a way that I now need to make sense of. I was asked when I started this book by my very good friend and editor, Peter Hubbard at HarperCollins. He says, who runs Mariner Books, he says, now, how come we didn't deal with transgender stuff all these many years ago? Where is this coming from? And in this book, I have a character who is transgender, assigned girl at birth, is a boy. Ancestors came over on the Mayflower. Ancestors caused some real problems. One of them, an adolescent cousin, shot a musket on the Mayflower that threatened to blow up the boat. And another wandered off and discovered a territory and had to be brought back by Native Americans back to wherever, Plymouth Rock, I guess. Now, what do these things have to do with each other? At one time, much of the exploration we did in the world as adolescents happened in the physical world. You brooked a river behind your house. Your parents told you not to go over there, but you were exploring the land. Go west, young man, is the quote. And the rest of the quote is, go west, young man, and grow up with your country. We physically explored the world, reconciling what was known and what was new. But increasingly, we do that inside our minds with ideas. We explore the uncharted territory of our minds, of spirit, of gender, of sexuality, of right and wrong, of morality. It's been happening since the 60s and before, but increasingly people explore in that area. The reason no one explored the idea of transgender 100 years ago, or not on any sort of basis that was discussed, was because we hadn't gotten to that point in the pioneering yet. It's like saying, why hadn't we discovered California in 1650? We hadn't gotten there yet. And at every generation is going to explore a little further than what's comfortable for the prior generation. That's the nature of what we're discussing right here. And Anna and Thomas represent this story.
Wow. And yeah, and I like the butterfly metaphor, obviously, coming out of the chrysalis and finding a new identity. These are just such troubling times, and I said it at the top, like culture accelerates, and exponentially. It just gets faster and faster and faster. I think of my poor 90-year-old mom, you know what I mean? Her old man was like cranking up a Model T, and now they're like, we got probes on Mars. All that in her lifetime for her to, I mean, just watching her try to answer her cell phone is just, you could feel it.
But John, she's 90. Why
Yeah.
is she 90?
Well, she survived.
Okay, but what would her lifespan have been 200 years ago?
Yeah, true.
Well,
47.
is that a win or not a win?
Well, I don't, I mean, when it would be very easy for a young man to say that's not a win, but they don't see the allure of, watching the 5 o'clock news, then the 6 o'clock news, then the 7 o'clock news, and then watching Wheel of Fortune and eating a microwave dinner. They don't, that looks like death to the young man,
Or to put it
but
another way, they don't see the value in not dying at that point.
yeah.
And the reason I mention it is just to keep in context the thing you said about how bad things are right now. Things are bad in a lot of respects, and things are really, really good in a lot of respects. The lifespan nearly doubled in the last few centuries, has doubled.
So what do you think the biggest cultural misunderstanding between today's adults and today's adolescents is?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that they are programmed to explore, that they explore the terrain that they are provided with and go a little bit beyond it, and that is nothing for parents to take personally. And that the survival of adolescence, to the extent we don't take this personally, we don't add more complications into their lives. I think we draw the lines around the things that will threaten their ability to survive this delicate period, but also recognize that they are doing something they are biologically programmed to do for their survival and for ours. And I guess I'd finally say that this doesn't mean that we let them run roughshod over us. I have this phrase, it's a little glib in the book, that says, for parents, love, lead, and let go. We can love them unconditionally. We can lead them and say, this is not appropriate what you're doing right now. When it comes to behaviors that are obnoxious and mean and self-defeating, and then we need to let go and say, and this is your life you're living. It's not about me. It's about you.
And letting go, I mean, you're a parent. It's the hardest part. It's the hardest part. Listen, my mom let go of my 16-year-old sister and said, you go take this road trip with your friends. And my dad was like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. And she went on the road trip and she never came back. And then that exploded everything. But like, you still got to do
that twice. Did she get in a car accident?
Yes, but she wasn't driving the car. The car had broken down and they were pushing it up a slight grade, and it started to slip back. Everybody else jumped out of the way. She got pinned underneath. But my point is you still have to let go. I had to let my 16-year-old go on a road trip. He was 16, and I'm like, let me just talk to the parent. Let me talk to the parent. I'm not just going to let you go. I need to, but I knew I had to let him go, even though that's the big blaring red thing going off in my head that, like, is this history repeating itself or whatever? This is a major road trip. This is his first thing. I got to know. And I haven't met the parent yet. And so, but you got to do it, you got to do it within certain parameters, and you have to you can only control what you can kind of control. But then I think, and it worked out fine. He had a great time. It was wonderful. But like, what if it hadn't? Like, how do you move on from that? I don't. But you gotta let him explore. No, the world. If we didn't let people explore, then what are we doing? We're just stuck on one place. Oh, okay. Well, we're kind of winding down here, but I wanna just kind of as a summation, in knowing what all that you've learned in your research, what advice would you give to a parent who feels overwhelmed, fearful, or powerless watching their child enter adolescence? I mean, again, I'm all ears too.
I guess the things I would say are one, to set the boundaries around the things that are absolutely vital. And every parent's going to be a little bit different on those things, but I would urge a parent to think that missing a class here and there, having a beer, staying out too late some nights, these are not life-threatening and not a sign of quote unquote disrespect. And that leads to the second thing about taking this personally. To the extent that we can be clear with our children and not get involved in these deep codependent experiences with them, we're going to make it easier for them to get through this period because they have less information to juggle. Let's be clear about the things we need to be clear about, love them, and then let them explore.
We'll call it the Richtel hierarchy. It's Maslow has his. Now we have the Richtel hierarchy of adolescent parenting. He is Matt Richtel. He is the author of How We Grow Up, which is a fascinating exploration of adolescence. It is available wherever books are sold. Matt, thanks so much for being our fresh face and how this has been a very productive conversation. I know for our listeners, but for me personally. So appreciate you, man.
It's a privilege, John. Thank you.